The air was thick with tension as Jack walked through the halls of the Queen's palace. The Queen had been distant lately, her once calm demeanor replaced by a quiet, unshakable focus. Jack could feel it too. Something was coming, something that made the Queen uneasy. He had been preparing for new trials, new tests, but this felt different. It wasn't long before Jack found himself summoned to the Queen's private chamber. The usual guards stood at attention, their alien armor gleaming under the soft lights. Jack could sense the gravity in the air as he approached the Queen. She was standing near a large window, looking out over the dark expanse of the alien world. Her violet skin glowed faintly in the low light, and her sharp eyes were focused on the horizon, as if she were anticipating something. "Jack," she said, her voice steady but laced with something darker. "We have a problem." Jack stepped forward, his heart beating a little faster. "What's going on?" The Queen turned to face him, her expression serious. "A new threat has emerged. There are factions in the galaxy that have begun to notice your power, and they want it." Jack's brow furrowed. He had expected challenges, but this was something else. "Who are they?" "They call themselves the Valkyrie," she explained. "A ruthless group of mercenaries and warlords who seek control over the strongest weapons and warriors in the galaxy. They believe the sword you wield holds the key to ruling the stars." Jack tightened his grip on the sword, feeling the familiar hum of energy beneath his fingers. He had grown used to the blade's power, but hearing that others wanted it made him uneasy. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something much bigger. The Queen's eyes softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "The Valkyrie are coming for us. They will stop at nothing to take what they want, and they will test you in ways you cannot predict." Jack's mind raced. The Queen had trusted him with the sword, but now it seemed the real battle was just beginning. "What do you want me to do?" "You will fight, Jack," she said. "But more importantly, you must learn to lead. You will need to rally the allies we have, and prepare for what's coming." Jack felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He was a soldier, not a leader. The idea of commanding others, of being the one to make the decisions, felt overwhelming. But the Queen's gaze was unwavering. And in that moment, Jack realized that she was giving him something more than just a challenge. She was giving him a purpose. "We are outnumbered," the Queen continued. "The Valkyrie will come in full force, and they will not hesitate. But with you, we may have a chance." Jack swallowed hard. "I won't let you down." The Queen studied him for a long moment, and for the first time, there was a faint trace of a smile on her lips. "I don't doubt you, Jack. You have already proven yourself. But the battles ahead will be harder. You will face enemies unlike any you've ever seen, and you must be ready." With that, she turned back to the window, her expression hardening once more. Jack stood there, his mind swirling with everything that had just been revealed. The Valkyrie were coming, and they would not stop until they had what they wanted. Jack could feel the weight of the sword at his side, and in that moment, he understood. This was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting everything he had come to care for: the Queen, the galaxy, and the power that had chosen him. The future was uncertain, but Jack knew one thing for sure: he would fight, and he would not back down. The battle for the galaxy had only just begun. The final battle had arrived. The Valkyrie fleet loomed just beyond the capital, its ships massive and intimidating. The Queen's empire had fought hard to hold its ground, but Jack knew that this would be the decisive moment. He stood at the head of the command center, the sword at his side, its energy pulsing with the rhythm of his heartbeat. His eyes scanned the monitors as the fleet prepared for the assault. The Queen's forces were ready, but the Valkyrie were relentless. Jack felt the weight of responsibility press down on him. This was more than just a fight for survival. This was about the future of the galaxy, and it was his decision, his leadership, that would determine the outcome. The Queen had entrusted him with the sword, and in doing so, she had given him more than just a weapon. She had given him the key to the galaxy's future. He had spent weeks learning how to wield its power, but now it was time to truly unlock its potential. The sword was more than just an object. It was a symbol of strength, of humanity's ability to overcome the impossible. Jack, the Queen's voice cut through his thoughts. He turned to find her standing beside him, her expression serious but filled with a hint of hope. This is your moment. The sword will guide you, but you must trust yourself. Lead them. Jack nodded, his grip tightening around the hilt of the sword. He had trained for this, but nothing could truly prepare him for the weight of the decision. His humanity, his ability to adapt and think differently, was what would make the difference. And he had learned, over these weeks, that he was ready. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a leader. The countdown began. In a few short moments, they would strike. Jack gave the order, and the fleet moved into position. His heart raced as the first wave of Valkyrie ships came into view. The battle began, but Jack knew that this was only the beginning. The Valkyrie were powerful, their ships fast and well-armed, but Jack wasn't fighting just with strength. He used the sword's power to guide him, to focus his mind. He called upon the ancient energy within the blade, and with each strike, he felt a surge of strength. The Valkyrie fleet began to fall back as Jack's forces pushed forward, using strategy, speed, and precision. As the battle raged in space, Jack stood at the heart of the command center, his focus unwavering. The sword hummed with power, and Jack felt its energy connect with his own. He wasn't just leading his people, he was leading the future. And with each move, each command, the Valkyrie grew weaker. In the end, it was Jack's leadership, his humanity, that turned the tide. The Valkyrie fleet broke, their forces scattered and retreating. The battle was won, but the true victory was the legacy Jack had created. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's strength, resilience, and determination. As the capital stood safe, Jack turned to face the Queen. She stood with him, a proud smile on her face. You did it, Jack. You've proven that humanity is not only capable of surviving, it is capable of leading. Jack looked at the sword in his hand, its glow dimming as the battle ended. It had been more than a weapon. It had been the key to a new beginning. The Queen had given him the sword, but it was his choices that had shaped the galaxy's future. The sword's power had been unlocked, not through force, but through trust, leadership, and humanity's ability to adapt and overcome. Jack had come a long way from the soldier who had first arrived on the alien planet. He had proven himself, not just with the sword, but with his heart. The galaxy was safe, for now. But Jack knew that this was just the beginning. The legacy of humanity had only just begun to unfold, and he would lead it into a new era. The sword had guided him, but it was his choices that had made the difference. And as he stood there, looking out over the galaxy he had saved, Jack knew that he had truly become the leader he was meant to be. The journey to RL's stronghold was a tense one. The farther they got from Taurus 5, the more uneasy Alex felt. He could sense the danger closing in around them. Every turn, every decision they made seemed to carry heavier consequences. Zara had been quiet for most of the trip, her eyes fixed on the horizon, but Alex could feel the weight of her thoughts. She was preparing for something big, something that would change everything. They had learned from Doran's contacts that RL's stronghold was located on a heavily fortified moon orbiting a gas giant. It was a place of secrets, power, and danger. Zara's enemies were everywhere, and they needed to be careful. If they made even one wrong move, it could be the end of their fight. Zara sat in the cockpit next to Alex, studying the holographic map in front of them. The moon's atmosphere was turbulent, filled with electromagnetic storms that could disrupt their ship's systems. They would have to be careful, but they couldn't afford to turn back now. "We'll need to be stealthy," Zara said, breaking the silence. "Errol has eyes on every corner of this moon. If he knows we're coming, we'll be walking into a trap." Alex glanced at her, his hand steady on the controls. "I know. We'll land as quietly as possible, slip through the outer defenses, and get to the heart of the stronghold. We'll find a way to expose Orel for what he really is." Zara nodded, but her expression was tense. "It's not just about exposing him anymore. It's about taking him down. He's taken everything from me, from my people." Alex could see the determination in her eyes, the fire that had been there from the beginning. She wasn't just fighting for her throne anymore. She was fighting for justice. The man who had betrayed her family was about to face the consequences of his actions. As they approached the moon, the tension in the cockpit grew. Alex maneuvered the ship carefully through the thick clouds of storm, the lights flickering as the ship's shields struggled to maintain their integrity. It was a battle just to keep the ship on course, and Alex's eyes were focused entirely on the controls. "Almost there," Alex muttered, his voice tense. "We'll be in range of the stronghold soon. You ready?" Zara didn't answer right away. She was staring out the window, her eyes distant. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but resolute. "This is it. There's no turning back now." They entered the outer perimeter of the stronghold's defenses, and Alex felt his heart race. He had no idea what was waiting for them on the other side. But Zara had made it clear they couldn't afford to fail. "We need to split up," Zara said, her voice steady as she turned to Alex. "I'll find Orel. You create a distraction. We don't have much time before the guards realize we're here." Alex nodded, understanding her plan. The risks were high, but there was no other choice. They had to act quickly, and they had to act fast. As the ship made its final approach, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The stakes were higher than ever, but he also knew one thing for sure. He would do whatever it took to help Zara take back what was rightfully hers. The moon loomed large in front of them, the stronghold now visible in the distance. There was no turning back. Alex quickly made his way back to the ship, the alien woman still cradled in his arms. His mind was filled with questions, but there was no time to think. He had to get her to safety. His ship was the closest place that offered any chance of survival. He pushed through the dense forest, his thoughts a swirl of confusion. Who was she? What was she doing on this desolate planet? As he finally reached the ship, he hurriedly entered and set the woman down on a seat. He checked her pulse again. It was steady but weak. He began to search for any medical supplies he could find, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to remain calm. His first priority was to stop the bleeding and tend to her wounds, but his mind kept drifting back to her strange appearance, her violet skin, her delicate features, and those pointed ears. It was nothing like anything he had seen before. "Hey, are you okay?" Alex asked gently as he worked to wrap a bandage around her arm. The woman opened her eyes slowly, her gaze locking with his. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice soft, but carrying an undeniable authority. "I don't know how to thank you." Alex paused, surprised by the depth in her voice. "I didn't do much. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time," he replied, trying to brush off the intensity of the situation. But the woman shook her head, her expression serious. "You don't understand," she said, her voice more firm now. "I am Zara. I am the last of my royal family. You didn't just save my life. You've saved the future of my people." Alex blinked, not fully understanding. "Royal family? What do you mean?" he asked. Zara's eyes softened with a mix of sadness and regret. "My planet was taken over by a traitorous cousin. He murdered my family, and now he rules in their place. I escaped, but not without enemies chasing me. There are bounty hunters after me, and they would have killed me if not for you." Alex listened intently, piecing together the fragments of her story. "So, you're a princess?" he asked, still trying to wrap his head around what she was saying. Zara nodded slowly, her gaze distant as though she were lost in painful memories. "I was next in line for the throne. But now, I am nothing. The people of my planet see me as dead. Without me, there is no one left to lead them." Alex felt a wave of sympathy for her. He had never imagined he'd end up in a situation like this. Here was a royal alien, hunted by her own family's betrayers, and she was now depending on him for her survival. "I don't know what I can do to help," Alex said, still trying to understand the gravity of the situation. "But I'll do what I can to keep you safe. We'll figure this out together." Zora's eyes brightened for a moment, and she looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "You don't understand yet," she said softly, her voice tinged with emotion. "But you will. You may have saved me, but I owe you more than just my life. I swear that I will repay you, no matter what." Alex was stunned by her words. He hadn't expected this. He had just acted on instinct. But now, it seemed that his life had taken a turn he could never have imagined. The stakes were higher than he realized, and it looked like his accidental rescue had thrust him into something much bigger than he ever expected. He took a deep breath. "All right, Zora. We'll figure this out together. But first, we need to get you some rest. We'll deal with the rest later." Zora nodded, grateful for his kindness. But in her eyes, Alex could see a spark of something more, something powerful. It was clear that this was only the beginning of a much greater adventure. Jack's victory in the arena had earned him the respect of the alien soldiers, but his mind was still racing with questions. The sword, still warm in his hands, felt different than it had before. The strange hum he had first noticed now pulsed with a quiet intensity, as if the blade itself was alive and waiting for him to understand its true potential. For the next few days, Jack trained in solitude, pushing himself harder than ever. The alien queen had given him no rest, no time to reflect on his victory. He was only allowed brief moments of respite before being thrust back into the next round of training. But no matter how much he practiced, the sword seemed to resist his attempts to master it. Sometimes it felt too heavy, other times too light. The energy that pulsed from it would ebb and flow, unpredictable. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning, when the sky over the alien planet began to glow with the first light of day, that Jack finally began to understand. He was in a secluded training area deep within the palace grounds, alone with the sword and his thoughts. The queen's voice had echoed in his mind ever since the first trial. "Show me how you use it." Jack swung the sword through the air, each movement a blend of muscle memory and instinct, but it wasn't enough. The sword wasn't responding as it should. Frustration built up inside him, but instead of letting it overwhelm him, Jack stopped. He stood still, breathing deeply, trying to clear his mind. The blade was heavy, but only in his hands. The energy it carried wasn't something he could fight against. It wasn't a weapon to be controlled through force. It was a tool to be understood. He realized that the sword wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a conduit, a bridge to something greater than himself. It was waiting for him to connect with it, to unlock the power within. Jack closed his eyes, letting go of everything he had known about fighting. He stopped thinking of it as a battle, a test. Instead, he focused on the feeling of the sword, the way it vibrated in his hands. Slowly, as if guided by an unseen force, Jack raised the sword above his head. At that moment, a pulse of energy surged from the blade, stronger than ever before. Jack's body reacted before his mind could catch up. He swung the sword down, and with it came an explosion of energy, sending shockwaves through the ground beneath him. The force of the strike cracked the earth and sent a blinding flash of light into the air. For a moment, everything went silent. Jack stood frozen, stunned by the power that had flowed through him. The sword's hum had gone quiet, but a feeling of calm washed over him. The blade was no longer just a weapon. It had become a part of him. When Jack opened his eyes, the training ground around him was in ruins. The ground had been torn apart, and rocks were scattered across the area. His breath came in quick gasps, but there was no doubt in his mind now. The sword was more than just a weapon. It was a force of nature. He knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The queen had given him the sword, but it was up to him to learn how to wield its power. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something much greater. The sword was meant for more than a simple soldier. It was meant for a leader. Jack looked up at the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to rise. He felt a sense of purpose that he had never experienced before. The sword had shown him a glimpse of its power, but there was still so much to learn. He was ready. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jack was prepared to face them. And this time, he would do it with the sword at his side. The battle outside raged on, but inside the palace, a heavy silence hung in the air. The flickering lights from the monitors cast shadows across the war room. Jack stood in front of the large holographic display, his eyes glued to the advancing Valkyrie fleet. His mind was focused, calculating the next move. Despite the chaos and destruction unfolding in space, he knew they couldn't back down. Not now. The Queen was by his side, her expression unreadable as always. She had been watching him closely ever since the battle began, but today, something in her gaze was different. There was a tension in the air, a sense of urgency that Jack couldn't ignore. "The fleet is holding," Nara, the Queen's second-in-command, said, her voice steady despite the pressure. "But we can't keep up this defense for much longer." Jack clenched his fists. He could feel the weight of the sword at his side, its energy humming with power. The blade was no longer just a weapon. It had become an extension of his will. But even with the sword's power, he knew it wouldn't be enough. The Valkyrie were too strong, their forces overwhelming. The Queen took a step closer, her gaze shifting to the holographic display. "We've fought many battles, Jack. But this one is different. The Valkyrie won't stop until they have what they want." Jack turned to face her, a sense of urgency rising in his chest. "Then what do we do? We can't keep fighting like this. We need a plan." The Queen's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, Jack saw a glimpse of something he hadn't expected: vulnerability. The weight of leadership had taken its toll on her. She had carried the burden of her people's survival for so long, and now it was on Jack's shoulders too. "The sword you carry," she began, her voice quieter than usual, "was created by my ancestors. It was meant for someone who could lead, not just fight. It's not just a weapon, Jack. It's a key." Jack furrowed his brow, trying to understand. A key to what? The Queen took a deep breath, her gaze distant. "A key to the ancient power that lies at the heart of this galaxy. The power to end this war, to defeat the Valkyrie, and to restore balance. But you must be willing to embrace it, to fully understand what the sword is capable of." Jack's heart raced. He had always known the sword was powerful, but this was more than he could have imagined. "You're saying the sword can end this war?" The Queen nodded. "But it's not just about the blade. It's about you, Jack. You have the potential to wield that power. I chose you because I saw something in you that none of my people possess. You are human, and it is that humanity, your ability to adapt, to think beyond the obvious, that will unlock the sword's true power." Jack took a step back, his mind racing. He had come to understand the sword as a tool, a weapon to fight with. But now it seemed as though it was much more than that. It was a force of nature, tied to the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, and the pressure of it all almost felt suffocating. "But how do I unlock its power?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Queen looked at him with a piercing intensity. "You must trust yourself, Jack. Trust in your ability to make decisions, to lead. The sword will guide you, but you must take that first step. Only then will you be able to tap into its true strength." Jack nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling deep within him. The battle outside was still raging, and the Valkyrie were closing in. But now he knew what he had to do. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something bigger, something that could change the fate of the galaxy. With a deep breath, Jack turned to face the holographic display once more. The Queen's revelation had changed everything. The sword wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to the future, and Jack was ready to unlock it. The Valkyrie wouldn't win. Not while he still had a choice. Alex had always dreamed of exploring space, but he never expected his first real adventure to start like this. His small ship, the Nova Horizon, was drifting through a quiet part of space, far from the bustling galactic hubs. He was on a routine mission, delivering supplies to a distant research station, when a strange signal began to flash on his control panel. It was faint at first, a series of repeating beeps that seemed almost desperate. He glanced at the radar. Nothing but empty space. But the signal was clear. He checked the coordinates. The signal was coming from a remote planet, a place he hadn't heard of before. Normally, he would have ignored it, but something about it pulled at him. Maybe it was the isolation of the vast emptiness, or maybe it was just a gut feeling that told him this was no ordinary distress call. With a quick decision, Alex altered his course. As he approached the planet, the atmosphere was thick with clouds, hiding much of the surface. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he prepared for the worst. Landing would be risky, given the rough terrain he had read about. His ship shuddered as it pierced through the atmosphere, eventually finding a small flat area near a dense forest. His landing was a bit bumpy, but the Nova Horizon held together. He let out a sigh of relief, grateful to have made it. Stepping out of the ship, Alex looked around. The planet's surface was quiet, almost eerie. The only sound was the hum of his ship's engines cooling down. He pulled up his jacket and walked toward the signal source. The thick woods were in front of him, their tall trees casting long shadows. He could barely see through the underbrush, but the signal was stronger here, guiding him deeper into the forest. It wasn't long before he saw her. Lying half-conscious on the forest floor was a woman, an alien woman, to be precise. Her skin was a soft shade of violet, and her clothes, torn and stained, barely covered her slender frame. She looked delicate, but there was something about her that seemed powerful, even in her weakened state. Her long, dark hair flowed like a river of ink, and her ears were pointed, reminding him of the elves in old Earth stories. Alex's heart raced. He wasn't sure what to do. He had never seen anything like this before. He knelt beside her, checking for signs of life. She was breathing, but barely. His instincts kicked in, and he carefully lifted her into his arms. The moment he touched her, she gasped, her eyes flickering open. They were a brilliant shade of green, almost glowing in the dim light. "Please," she whispered weakly, "you have to help me." Alex nodded, his mind racing. He didn't know what kind of trouble she was in, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to get her to safety. He lifted her with as much care as he could, turning back to his ship. As he walked, Alex tried to make sense of what was happening. Who was she? Why was she out here alone, injured? And what was this strange, unexplainable feeling that told him her survival was somehow connected to his own? He didn't have answers, but one thing was certain. His life was about to change forever. The stronghold was quiet now. The battle had been fought, and Errol was gone. Zora stood in the center of the throne room, her hands trembling slightly, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The weight that had crushed her for so long was finally lifted. Her family's legacy, her people's hope, was no longer in the hands of a murderer. She had done it. She had reclaimed her throne. Alex stepped up beside her, his face serious but filled with respect. He had been by her side through all of this. What started as a chance encounter had led them here, to this moment. And now, the future seemed full of possibilities. "You did it," Alex said quietly, his voice full of admiration. Zora glanced at him, her eyes tired but filled with gratitude. "We did it, Alex. I couldn't have done it without you." Her voice held a note of finality, as if she was still trying to process everything that had happened. Alex gave her a small smile. "I just followed your lead. You were always the one with the strength to do this." Zara felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just his words. It was the way he had been with her through every challenge, every danger. He hadn't just been a protector. He had been her equal, her ally, and in a way, he had become her closest friend. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." They stood in silence for a moment, taking it all in. The grandeur of the throne room, now empty and quiet, seemed to reflect the calm that had settled over them. Zara knew that things would never be the same again, but that didn't scare her. It felt like the beginning of something new. "Now what?" Alex asked after a while, his gaze shifting from the empty throne to Zara. "What happens next?" Zara took a deep breath, her thoughts drifting back to the people of her planet. Her people, the ones she had sworn to protect and lead. She knew what she had to do. "We rebuild," she said firmly. "It won't be easy, but the people need to know they're not forgotten. They need to know that I'm not just a figurehead. I'm here to fight for them." Alex nodded, his face serious. "And I'll be right here with you." Zara's heart swelled with gratitude. She had never expected to find someone like Alex. He had been a stranger, but now, he was someone she could count on. Together, they had fought through every obstacle. Together, they had won. "We'll make it work," Zara continued, her voice steady. "There's so much to do, but we'll do it together." As she stood there, looking at the empty throne, Zara realized that she wasn't just reclaiming her title, she was reclaiming her life. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid. She had the strength, the support, and the will to build something new, not just for herself, but for her people. Alex stood beside her, ready for whatever came next. The galaxy might have been full of uncertainty, but together, they would face it head-on. And so, with the echoes of the past finally silenced, Zara took her place in the throne room, not as a ruler shackled by fear, but as a leader who had found her power, her purpose, and her future. The next few days passed in a blur. Alex spent most of his time trying to get his ship in working condition again, while Zara recovered from her injuries. She was tough, stronger than she looked, but she still needed rest. When Alex wasn't busy repairing the ship, he tried to learn more about Zara's past, though she was reluctant to talk about it at first. One evening, as the stars shimmered outside the ship's small windows, Zara sat beside Alex, her expression serious. The ship was quiet, and the only sounds were the low hum of the engines. Alex turned to her, wiping his hands on a rag, ready to get back to work, but something in Zara's eyes told him it was time to have the conversation he had been waiting for. "I haven't told you everything," she said quietly, "about who I am, about why I was on that planet." Alex stopped, sitting back down across from her. "You've told me enough," he said. "You're the last heir to the throne, and your enemies are after you." Zara nodded slowly. "That's true," she began. "But what I haven't told you is who these enemies are, and why they would go so far to hunt me down." Alex leaned forward, his interest piqued. He could see that she was holding something back, something important. "My cousin, Errol," Zara continued, her voice steady, but with a hint of bitterness. "He was the one who betrayed my family. He killed my parents, and he took control of the throne. Everyone thought he was loyal, but he had always been after power. When my father died, Errol seized his chance. He murdered my family in cold blood and took the crown." Alex's eyes widened in shock. "So he's the one who's been sending bounty hunters after you?" Zara's eyes darkened with anger. "Yes. He wants me dead. If I die, then no one can challenge his rule. But I'm still alive. And as long as I am, there is hope." Alex was silent for a moment, taking it all in. He had heard of political betrayals before, but this was something else entirely. A cousin killing a whole family to claim a throne. This was a betrayal on a scale he couldn't even imagine. "So, you're running from him?" Alex asked, his voice low. "You're not going back?" Zara shook her head. "Not until I'm ready. Not until I can expose Errol for what he really is. The people of my planet are suffering under his rule. They believe he's a legitimate king, But the truth is, he's a murderer, and they deserve to know that. Alex felt a surge of respect for Zora. Despite everything she had lost, she was still fighting for her people. She wasn't just trying to survive. She was trying to free an entire world from a tyrant. "You don't have to do this alone," Alex said, his voice firm. "I don't know how, but I'll help you. If you want to take down your cousin, then I'm with you." Zora looked at him, a mix of surprise and gratitude in her eyes. "You don't know what you're getting into," she said softly, but there was a new sense of warmth in her voice. "But I'm glad you're with me." Alex gave her a small smile. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said, glancing around the ship. "But I'm not just going to leave you now. You've got a mission, and so do I. And maybe together, we can make a difference." Zara smiled back, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "Thank you, Alex," she said. "I won't forget this." The days following the Queen's warning passed in a blur of preparation. Jack had been thrust into the role of leader, a position he had never wanted, but knew he had to accept. Every hour was spent training, planning, and strategizing. He had come to understand that the sword was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of something much larger than himself. The Queen had entrusted him with it, and now he had to live up to that trust. The Valkyrie had made their move. Word had spread that the mercenaries and warlords were closing in, preparing for an all-out assault on the Queen's empire. Jack's heart raced as he stood in the war room, surrounded by maps of the galaxy and reports from the Queen's spies. The Valkyrie were ruthless, and their army was vast. The Queen's forces were strong, but they were outnumbered. And Jack knew that the battle ahead would be unlike anything he had ever faced. "Their fleet is already on the move." The Queen's second-in-command, a tall, armored alien named Nera, said as she pointed to a series of dots on the map. "They're targeting the heart of our empire, the capital planet." Jack's eyes narrowed. The capital was where everything started, the center of power, the heart of the Queen's rule. If the Valkyrie took it, everything would crumble. There would be no hope for the galaxy. The stakes were higher than ever. "We need to act fast," Jack said, his voice steady. "We can't let them reach the capital." The Queen, standing at the head of the table, looked at him. Her eyes were filled with a cold determination. "We don't have much time. Our defenses will hold for a while, but we need to strike before they can fully mobilize." Jack felt the weight of the moment. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting to protect everything that mattered. The Queen, the people, the galaxy itself. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a leader, and it was up to him to guide them through this. "Send a message to our allies," Jack said. "We need to rally everyone we can. And get our fleet ready. We'll hit them hard, but we have to do it fast and smart." The Queen nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "You've learned quickly, Jack. I trust you." With that, the War Council was in motion. Plans were drawn up, and the fleet was mobilized. Jack's mind raced as he worked alongside Nera and the other commanders, preparing for the fight of their lives. He could feel the tension in the air, the pressure building with every passing minute. As the first waves of enemy ships appeared on the horizon, Jack stood at the command center, watching as the battle began. The vast expanse of space was filled with the lights of exploding ships and the sounds of laser fire. The Valkyrie had come in full force, their fleet massive and intimidating. But Jack wasn't afraid. He had the sword, and more importantly, he had the will to fight. "Ready the fleet," Jack ordered. "We won't let them take the capital. Not without a fight." The battle raged on, and Jack felt the adrenaline pumping through his veins. The sword pulsed at his side, and he knew that it was guiding him, giving him strength. The Queen had given him this weapon for a reason, and now he was using it to lead the charge against the Valkyrie. The fleet clashed in space, and Jack's heart raced as he watched the chaos unfold. But through it all, he remained focused. This was his fight now, and he would see it through to the end. The Valkyrie would not win, not as long as he was standing.